Hello, hello, hello! Greetings, salutations, konnichiwa, and every other form of green across this vast, marvelous multiverse. I am Matsu Quinox. This is Horace, and welcome back, my dear, marvelous, wonderful scholars, to the study. Hello, hello, hello there. Hello there, Julian20. Congratulations on Game First. Ho, 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 jingle all the way. Well, I suppose it could be. I mean, it's nearly holiday time. It's Christmas. It's nearly Christmas time, but it's not quite there. But you can sing Christmas carols if you want, which is an odd choice, given what we're reading tonight. Oh, hello there, Dr. Zadium. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's good to see you here. And welcome all you fine, marvelous scholars, wherever you are, whenever you are, across this vast, magnificent, omniversal multiverse. Yes. So, how are you all, my dear scholars? I hope you're doing well. Oh my goodness, little itchy nose. Empty waist. It's cold. Yes, it's very cold, isn't it? It is very cold. It's so cold. It's you could. I think I've lost feeling in my legs. Actually. Oh my good. Wait, wait, wait. I oh, oh, wait. I've lost feeling in my legs. Wait, wait a second. So wait, I've lost feeling. What? Hold on a second. Horace, I think I've lost feeling in my. Whoa, 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 oh, whoa, 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 oh, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Hold on a second. Um, I just gotta hold on. Empty waist. You've lost feeling in your legs. Quite the feat. Waist. Not now. I need to catch myself. Need to climb back up. Hold on. Get a good foothold. Whoa, 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 no, no, whoa, no, 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 no. Maverick, he's falling. Yes, I'm falling. Whoa, whoa. Okay. Oh, come on, come on. I can do this. I can do this. Oh, there we are. Oh my goodness. Ah, come on, warm up, warm up, warm up, warm up. Warm up already. Okay. Starting to get a little feeling. Hello, Private Maverick. Welcome. F2 Ace. Oh, yeah, also spiffy suit you've got there. Thank you, thank you. This is my second outfit. My secondary one. Most of the time you see my primary outfit. This is my secondary outfit. It's got you can't see it, but I got little gold etchings on my sides and on my sleeves, and my wonderful bow, along with my fabulous lapels. So this counts as my secondary suit. Oh, before I forget, we have a new scholar who has joined the study. Excuse me. Oh. Hands of the Ad God. Welcome. Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining our little group. Much appreciated. I am Matsukunax International Omniversal Librarian. This is Horace, and we are here in the room of the study, which Victoria's Road, which is where we are going to be reading today. Yes, we are indeed still in the study. I don't go out much, unfortunately. I mean, I technically can for I think 24 hours, but that's about it. 24, 36 hours. I can't remember which. Time is so weird here. Oh my goodness, let me get a little drink. Oh. Mm. So, Private Maverick, congratulations on your 5 stream streak. Private Maverick, just for Dickens to dig around. I I don't I don't get it. But if you're confident with that, congratulations. Thank you. Oh my goodness. So tonight, my dear scholars, We are going to be continuing our holiday reading of A Christmas Carol. We are on to the second stave, and this one involves the first ghost that Scrooge was fated to meet after Marley, his partner 7 years dead, came back to haunt him. Marley has warned Scrooge that unless he changes his ways, he will be doomed to a life as a Marley, a ghost wandering the world without the without the capacity of making things better for others. So now Scrooge waits the first of the spirits, which will lead him on the path to redemption. Or something like that. So anyway, shall we begin our reading, my dear scholars? Oh my goodness. If you hear me sniffling, it is this dry, dry air. Dry, cold air. I do not like dry, cold air. And coughing. Julian 20, yes please. FT Waste, take it away, librarian. Alright. So sit back, my dear scholars. Relax. Have a hot or cold beverage of your liking. Dim the lights if you wish. And let us begin our reading tonight of A Christmas Carol. Stave 2. The first of the three spirits. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking out of bed, he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes, when the chimes of a neighboring church struck the 4 quarters. So he listened for the hour. To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went on from 6 to 7, and from 7 to 8, and regularly up to 12. Then stopped. 12? It was past 2 when he went to bed. The clock was wrong. An icicle must have gone into the works. 12. He touched the spring of his repeater to correct this most preposterous clock. Its rapid little pulse beat 12, and stopped. "Why, it isn't possible," said Scrooge, "that I can have slept through a whole day and far into another night. It isn't possible that anything has happened to the sun, and this is 12 at noon." The idea being an alarming one, he scrambled out of bed and groped his way to the window. He was obliged to rub the frost off with the sleeve of his dressing gown before he could see anything, and could see very little then. All he could make out was that it was still very foggy and extremely cold, and that there was no noise of people running to and fro and making a great stir, as there unquestionably would have been if night had beaten off bright day and taken possession of the world. This was a great relief, because 3 days after sight of this first of exchange pay to Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge or his order, and so forth, would have become a mere United States security if there were no days to count by. Scrooge went to bed again, and thought, and thought, and thought it over, and over, and over, and could make nothing of it. The more he thought, the more perplexed he was, and the more he endeavored not to think, the more he thought. Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly. Every time he resolved within himself, after mature inquiry, that it was all a dream, his mind flew back again, like a strong spring released, to its first position, and presented the same problem to be worked all through. Was it a dream or not? Scrooge lay in this state until the chimes had gone 3 quarters more, when he remembered, on a sudden, that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled one. He resolved to lie awake until the hour was past, and considering that he could no more go to sleep than go to heaven, this was perhaps the wisest resolution in his power. The corridor was so long that he was more than once convinced he must have sunk into a doze unconsciously and missed the clock. At length it broke upon his listening ear. Ding dong. "A quarter past," said Scrooge, counting. Ding dong. "Half past," said Scrooge. Ding dong. "A quarter to it," said Scrooge. Ding dong. "The hour itself," said Scrooge triumphantly, "and nothing else." He spoke before the hour bell sounded, which it now did, with a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy one. Light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, I tell you, by a hand. Not the curtains at his feet, nor the curtains at his back, but those to which his face was addressed. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, and Scrooge, starting up into a half recumbent attitude, found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them as close to it as I am now to you, and I am standing in the spirit at your elbow. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child, as like an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave him the appearance of having receded from the view and been diminished to a child's proportions. Excuse me. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, were white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. The arms were very long and muscular, the hands the same, as if its hold were of uncommon strength. Its legs and feet, most delicately formed, were like those upper members, bare. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and round its waist was bound a luscious belt, the sheen of which was beautiful. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and in singular contradiction of that wintry album, had its dress trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was, that from the crown of its head there sprung a bright, clear jet of light, by which all this was visible, and which was doubtless the occasion of its using, in its duller moments, a great extinguisher for a cap, which it now held under its arm. Even this, though when Scrooge looked at it with increasing steadiness, was not its strangest quality. For as its belt sparkled with light, with and gli- for as its belt sparkled and glittered, now in one part, and now in another, and what was light one instant, at another time was dark, so the figure itself fluctuated in its distinctness, being now a thing with one arm, now with one leg, now with 20 legs, now a pair of legs without a head, now a head without a body, of which dissolving parts no outline would be visible in the dense gloom, wherein they melted away. And in the very wonder of this, it would be itself again, distinct and clear as ever. "Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me?" asked Scrooge. "I am," The voice was soft and gentle, singularly low, as if instead of being so close beside him, it were at a distance. "Who? And what are you?" Scrooge demanded. "I am the ghost of Christmas past." "Long past?" inquired Scrooge, observant of its dwarfish stature. "No, your past." Perhaps Scrooge could not have told anybody why, if anybody could have asked him, but he had a special desire to see the spirit in his cap, and begged him to be covered. "What?" exclaimed the ghost. "Would you so soon put out, with worldly hands, the light I give? Is it not enough that you are one of those whose passions made this cap, and forced me, through whole trains of years, to wear it low upon my brow?" Scrooge reverently disclaimed all intention to offend, or any knowledge of having wilfully bonded to the spirit at any period of his life. He then made bold to inquire what business brought him there. "Your welfare," said the ghost. Scrooge expressed himself much obliged, but could not help thinking that a night of unbroken rest would have been more conducive to that end. The spirit must have heard him thinking, for it said immediately, "Your reclamation, then. Take heed." It put out its strong hand as it spoke, and clasped him gently by the arm. "Rise, and walk with me." It would have been in vain for Scrooge to plead that the weather and the hour were not adapted to pedestrian purposes. That bed was warm, and the thermometer a long way below freezing. That he was clad but lightly in his slippers, dressing gown, and nightcap, and that he had a cold upon him at that time. The grasp, though gentle as a woman's hand, was not to be resisted. He rose, but finding that the spirit made towards the window, clasped its robe in supplication. I am a mortal," Scrooge remonstrated, "and liable to fall." "Bear but a touch of my hand. There," said the spirit, laying it upon his heart, "and you shall be upheld in more than this." As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall, and stood upon an open country road, with fields on either hand. The city had entirely vanished. Not a vestige of it was to be seen. The darkness and the mist had vanished with it, for it was a clear, cold winter day, with snow upon the ground. "Good heavens!" said Scrooge, clasping his hands together as he looked about him. "I was bred in this place. I was a boy here." The spirit gazed upon him mildly. Its gentle touch, though it had been light and instantaneous, appeared still present to the old man's sense of feeling. He was conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten. That's a little drink. I'm going to be drinking a lot during this chapter. Not as much as next week's, but a lot during this one. "Your lip is trembling," said the ghost. "And what is that upon your cheek?" Scrooge muttered with an unusual catching in his voice that it was a pimple, and begged the ghost to lead him where he would. "You recollect it? The way?" inquired the spirit.
Remember it? Cried Scrooge with fervor. I, I could walk it blindfold.
"Strange to have forgotten it for so many years," observed the ghost. "Let us go on." They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate and post and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and winding river. Some shaggy ponies now were seen trotting towards them with boys upon their backs, who called to other boys in country gigs and carts driven by farmers. All these boys were in great spirits and shouted to each other, until the broad fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air laughed to hear it. "They are but shadows of the things that have been," said the ghost. "They have no consciousness of us." The jocund travelers came on, and as they came, Scrooge knew and named them every one. Why was he rejoiced beyond all bounds to see them? Why did his cold eye glisten, and his heart leap as they went past? Why was he filled with gladness when he heard them give each other Merry Christmas as they parted at crossroads and byways for their several homes? What was Merry Christmas to Scrooge? Out upon Merry Christmas! What good had it ever done to him? "The school is not quite deserted," said the ghost. "A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still." Scrooge said he knew it, and he sobbed. They left the high road by a well-remembered lane, and soon approached a mansion of dull red brick, with a little weathercock-surmounted cupola on the roof, and a bell hanging in it. It was a large house, but one of broken fortunes, for the spacious offices were little used, their walls were damp and mossy, their windows broken, and their gates decayed. Fowls clucked and strutted in the stables, and the coach houses and sheds were overrun with grass. Nor was it more retentive of its ancient state within, for entering the dreary hall and glancing through the open doors of many rooms, they found them poorly furnished, cold, and vast. There was an earthly savour in the air, a chilly bareness in the place, which associated itself somehow with too much getting up by candlelight, and not too much to eat. They went, the ghost and Scrooge, across the hall, to a door at the back of the house. It opened before them, and disclosed a long, bare, melancholy room, made barer still by lines of plain deal forms and desks. At one of these, a lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire, and Scrooge sat down upon a form and wept to see his poor, forgotten self as he had used to be. Not a latent echo in the house, not a squeak and scuffle from the mice behind the paneling, not a drip from the half-thawed water-spout in the dull yard behind, not a sigh among the leafless boughs of one despondent poplar, not the idle swinging of an empty storehouse door, no, not a clicking in the fire, but fell upon the heart of Scrooge with a softening influence, and gave a freer passage to his tears. The spirit touched him on the arm and pointed to his younger self, intent upon his reading. Suddenly, a man, in foreign garments, wonderfully real and distinct to look at, stood outside the window, with an axe stuck in his belt, and leading an ass laden with wood by the bridle.
Why, it's Ali Baba, Scrooge exclaimed in ecstasy. It's dear old honest Ali Baba. Yes, yes, I know. One Christmas time, when yonder solitary child was left here all alone, he did come for the first time, just like that. Poor boy! And Valentine," said Scrooge, "and his wild brother Orson. There they go, and what's his name, who's put down in his drawers, asleep at the gate of Damascus. Don't you see him? And the Sultan's groom turned upside down by the genie. There he is upon his head. Serves him right. I'm glad of it. What business had he to be married to the princess?"
To hear Scrooge expending all the earnestness of his nature on such subjects in a most extraordinary voice between laughing and crying, and to see his heightened and excited face, would have been a surprise to his business friends in the city, indeed.
"There's the parrot," cried Scrooge. "Green body and yellow tail, with a thing like a lettuce growing out of the top of his head. There he is. Poor Robin Crusoe, he called him when he came home again after sailing round the island. Poor Robin Crusoe, where have you been, Robin Crusoe?" The man thought he was dreaming, but he wasn't. It was the parrot, you know. There goes Friday, running for his life to the little creek. "Hallo! Whoop! Hallo!"
Then, with a rapidity of transition very foreign to his usual character, he said in pity for his former self,
Bye-bye.
and cried again. Excuse me.
I, I wish.
Scrooge muttered, putting his hand in his pocket, and looking about him after drying his eyes with his cuff.
But it's, it's too late now.
"What is the matter?" asked the spirit.
"Nothing," said Scrooge. "Nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something. That's all."
The ghost smiled thoughtfully and waved its hands, saying as it did so, "Let us see another Christmas." Scrooge's former self grew larger at the words, and the room became a little darker and more dirty. The panels shrunk, the windows cracked, fragments of plaster fell out of the ceiling, and the naked laths were shown instead. But how all this was brought about Scrooge knew no more than you do. He only knew that it was quite correct, that everything had happened so, that there he was alone again, when all the other boys had gone home for the jolly holiday. He was not reading now, but walking up and down despairingly. Scrooge looked at the ghost, and with a mournful shaking of his head, glanced anxiously towards the door. Give me 1 second, my dear scholars. I need to do something quickly. I'll leave an intermission quick. Alright, sorry about that, my dear scholars. Now, where were we? Let's see. Glanced anxiously towards the door. It opened, and a little girl, much younger than the boy, came darting in, and putting her arms about his neck, and often kissing him, addressed him as her
Dear, dear brother, I have come to bring you home, dear brother, said the child, clapping her tiny hands and bending down to laugh. To bring you home, home, home. Home, little Fan, returned the boy. Yes, said the child, brimful of glee. Home for good and all, home for ever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be, that home's like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home. And he said, yes, you should, and send me to a coach to bring you, and you're to be a man, said the child, opening her eyes, and are never to come back here, but first we're to be together all the Christmas long, and have the merriest time in all the world. You are quite a woman, little Fan, exclaimed the boy. She clapped her hands and laughed and tried to touch his head, but being too little, laughed again and stood on tiptoe to embrace him. Then she began to drag him in her childish eagerness towards the door, and he, nothing loath to go, accompanied her. A terrible voice in the hall cried, "Bring down Master Scrooge's box there!" And in the hall appeared the schoolmaster himself, who glared on Master Scrooge with a ferocious condescension, and threw him into a dreadful state of mind by shaking hands with him. He then conveyed him and his sister into the veriest old well of a shivering best parlor that ever was seen, where the maps upon the wall and the celestial and terrestrial globes in the windows were waxy with cold. Here he produced a decanter of curiously light wine, and a block of curiously heavy cake, and administered installments of those dainties to the young people, at the same time sending out a meagre servant to offer a glass of something to the postboy, who answered that he thanked the gentleman, but if it was the same tap as he had tasted before, he had rather not. Master Scrooge's trunk being by this time tied on the top of the chassis, the children bade the schoolmaster good-bye right willingly, and getting into it, drove gaily down the garden sweep, the quick wheels dashing the hoar frost and snow from off the dark leaves of the evergreens like spray. Always a delicate creature, whom a breath might have withered, said the ghost. But she had a large heart. So she had, cried Scrooge. You're right, and not gainsay it, spirit. God forbid. She died a woman, said the ghost, and had, as I think, children. One child, Scrooge returned. True, said the ghost. Your nephew. Scrooge seemed uneasy in his mind, and answered briefly, yes. Although they had but that moment left the school behind them, they were now in the busy thoroughfares of a city, where shadowy passengers passed and repassed, where shadowy carts and coaches battled for the way, and all the strife and tumult of a real city were. It was made plain enough by the dressing of the shops that here too it was Christmas time again. But it was evening, and the streets were lighted up. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it. Know it? Said Scrooge. Was I apprenticed here? They went in. At the sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig sitting behind such a high desk that if he had been 2 inches taller he must have knocked his head against the ceiling, Scrooge cried in great excitement, Why, it's old Fezziwig! Bless his heart, it's Fezziwig alive again! Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over himself, from his shoes to his organ of benevolence, and called out in a
comfortable, oily, rich, fat, jovial voice. Yo ho there! Excuse me. Let me get that voice right, my dear scholars. Oh, okay. Here we go. Yo-ho, Dick! Yo-ho, Rabbit! Yo, I got it wrong. Yo-ho, that Ebenezer! Dick! Scrooge's former self, now grown a young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow prentice.
Dick Wilkins, to be sure, said Scrooge to the ghost. Bless me, yes, there he is. He was very much attached to me, was Dick. Poor Dick, dear, dear.
Yo-ho, my boys! Said Fezziwig. No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up, cried old Fezziwig with a sharp clap of his hands, before a man can say, Jack Robinson! Oh, you won't believe how those two fellows went at it. They charged in the street with the shutters, 1, 2, 3, had 'em up in their places, 4, 5, 6, barred 'em and pinned 'em, 7, 8, 9, and came back before you could have got to 12, panting like race horses. Hilly ho! Cried old Fezziwig, skipping down from the high desk with wonderful agility. Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here. Hilly ho, Dick! Chin up, Ebenezer! Clear away! There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away, or couldn't have cleared away with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed off, as if it were dismissed from public life forevermore. The floor was swept and watered. The lamps were trimmed. Fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night. In came a fiddler with a music book, and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it, and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast substantial smile. In came the 3 Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 young followers, whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid with her cousin, the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend, the milkman. In came the boy from over the way, who was suspected of not having board enough from his master, trying to hide himself behind the girl from next door, but one, who was proved to have had her ears pulled by her mistress. In they all came, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling. In they all came, anyhow and everyhow. Away they all went, 20 couple at once, hands half round and back again the other way, down the middle and up again, round and round in various stages of affectionate grouping. Old top couple always turning up in the wrong place. New top couple starting off again. As soon as they got there, all top couples at last, and not a bottom one to help them. When this result was brought about, old Fezziwig, clapping his hands to stop the dance, cried out, "Well done!" And the fiddler plunged his hot face into a pot of porter, especially provided for that purpose. But scorning rest upon his reappearance, he instantly began again, though there was no dancers yet, as if the other fiddler had been carried home, exhausted on a shutter, and he was a brand new man, resolved to beat him out of sight or perish. There were more dances, and there were forfeits, and more dances, and there was cake, and there was negus, and there was a great piece of cold roast, and there was a great piece of cold boiled, and there were mince pies and plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came after the roast and boiled, when the fiddler, an artful dog, mind, the sort of man who knew his business better than you or I could have told it him, struck up Sir Roger de Coverley. Then old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig. Top couple, too, with a good stiff piece of work cut out for them. 3 or 4 and 20 pair of partners, people who were not to be trifled with, people who would dance and had no notion of walking. But if they had been twice as many, 4 times, old Fezziwig would have been a match for them, and so would Mrs. Fezziwig. As to her, she was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the term. If that's not high praise, tell me higher, and I'll use it. A positive light appeared to issue from Fezziwig's calves. They shone in every part of the dance like moons. You couldn't have predicted at any given time what would become of him next. And when old Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig had gone all through the dance, advance and retire, hold hands with your partner, bow and curtsy, corkscrew, thread the needle and back again to your place, Fezziwig cut so deftly that he appeared to wink with his legs and came upon his feet again without a stagger. A little drink. When the clock struck 11, this domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took up their stations, one on either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually as he or she went out, wished him or her a Merry Christmas. When everybody had retired but the 2 prentices, they did the same to them, and thus the cheerful voices died away, and the lads were left to their beds, which were under a counter in the back shop. During the whole of this time Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene, and with his former self. He corroborated everything, remembered everything, enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation. It was not until now, when the bright faces of his former self and Dick were turned from them, that he remembered the ghost, and became conscious that it was looking full upon him, while the light upon its head burnt very clear. "A small matter," said the ghost, "to make these silly folks so full of gratitude."
Small,
echoed Scrooge. The spirit signed to him to listen to the 2 apprentices, who were pouring out their hearts in praise of Fezziwig, and when he had done so, said, "Why, is it not? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4, perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise?"
it isn't that,
said Scrooge, heated by the remark, and speaking unconsciously like his former, not his latter self.
It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, in things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune.
He felt the spirit's glance and stopped. "What?" is the matter?
Nothing particular, said Scrooge.
Something, I think.
The ghost insisted. No, said Scrooge. No, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all.
Oh, hello there, Dragon Thunder. Welcome. Looking dapper. Why, thank you, thank you. Maybe I should wear this outfit once a little bit more often. Excuse me. His former self turned down the lamps as he gave utterance to the wish, and Scrooge and the ghost again stood side by side in the open air. My time grows short, observed the spirit. Quick! I gotta take a drink of water for this scene. This was not addressed to Scrooge, or to anyone whom he could see, but it produced an immediate effect. For again Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. There was an eager, greedy, restless motion in the eye, which showed the passion that had taken root, and where the shadow of the growing tree would fall. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a morning dress, in whose eyes there were tears, which sparkled in the light that shone out of the ghost of Christmas past. It matters little, she said softly. To you, very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve.
What idol has displaced you? He rejoined.
A golden one.
This is the even-handed dealing of the world, he said. There is nothing on which it is so hard as poverty, and there is nothing it professes to condemn with such severity as the pursuit of wealth.
You fear the world too much, she answered gently. All your other hopes have merged into the hope of being beyond the chance of its sordid reproach. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one, until the master passion gain engrosses you. Have I not?
What then? He retorted. Even if I have grown so much wiser, what then? I am not changed towards you. She shook her head. Am I?
Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so, until, in good season, we could improve our worldly fortune by our patient industry. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man.
I was a boy, he said impatiently.
Your own feeling tells you that you are not what you are, she returned. I am. That which promised happiness when we were one in heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it and can release you.
Have I ever sought release?
In words, no, never.
In what then?
In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, in another atmosphere of life, another hope as its great end. In everything that made my love of you any worth or value in your sight. If this had never been between us, said the girl, looking mildly, but with steadiness upon him, tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now? Ah, no. He seemed to yield to the justice of this supposition in spite of himself. But he said with a struggle,
You think not?
I would gladly think otherwise if I could, she answered. Heaven knows, when I have learned a truth like this, I know how strong and irresistible it must be. But if you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday, can even I believe you would choose a dowerless girl? You, who in your very confidence with her, weigh everything by gain, or choosing her, if for a moment you are false enough to your one guiding principle to do so, do I not know that your repentance and regret would surely follow? I do, and I release you, with a full heart for the love of him you once were. He was about to speak, but with her head turned from him, she resumed. You may, you may. The memory of what is past half makes me hope you will have pain in this. A very, very brief time, and you will dismiss the recollection of it gladly, as an unprofitable dream, from which it happened well that you woke. May you be happy in the life you have chosen. She left him, and they parted.
Spirit, said Scrooge, show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me?
One shadow more,
exclaimed the ghost. No more, cried Scrooge. No more. I don't wish to see it. Show me no more.
but the relentless ghost pinioned him in both his arms and forced him to observe what happened next. They were in another they were in another scene and place. A room, not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near to the winter fire sat a beautiful young girl, so like the last that Scrooge believed it was the same, until he saw her, now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. The noise in this room was perfectly tumultuous, for there were more children there than Scrooge in his agitated state of mind could count. And unlike the celebrated herd in the poem, they were not 40 children conducting themselves like one, but every child was conducting itself like 40. The consequences were uproarious beyond belief, but no one seemed to care. On the contrary, the mother and daughter laughed heartily and enjoyed it very much. And the latter, soon beginning to mingle in the sports, got pillaged by the young brigades most ruthlessly. What would I not have given to be one of them? Though I never could have been so rude. No, no. I wouldn't for the wealth of all the world have crushed that braided hair and torn it down, and for the precious little shoe I wouldn't have plucked it off, God bless my soul, to save my life. As to measuring her waist in sport, as they did, bold young brood, I couldn't have done it. I should have expected my arm to have grown round it for a punishment, and never come straight again. And yet I should have dearly liked, I own, to have touched her lips, to have questioned her, that she might have opened them, to have looked upon the lashes of her downcast eyes, and never raised a blush, to have let loose waves of hair, an inch of which would be a keepsake beyond price. In short, I should have liked, I do confess, to have had the lightest license of a child, and yet been man enough to know its value. But now a knocking at the door was heard, and such a rush immediately ensued that she with laughing face and plundered dress was borne towards it, the center of a flushed and boisterous group, just in time to greet the father, who came home attended by a man laden with Christmas toys and presents. Then the shouting and the struggling and the onslaught that was made on the defenseless porter, the scaling him with chairs for ladders, to dive into his pockets, to spoil him of brown paper parcels, hold on tight by his cravat, hug him round the neck, pommel his back, and kick his legs in irrepressible affection. The shouts of wonder and delight with which the development of every package was received. The terrible announcement that the baby had been taken in the act of putting a doll's frying pan into his mouth, and was more than suspected of having swallowed a fictitious turkey glued on a wooden platter. The immense relief of finding this a false alarm, the joy and gratitude and ecstasy, they're all indescribable alike. It is enough by degrees the children and their emotions got out of the parlor, and by one stair at a time, up to the top of the house, where they went to bed, and so subsided. And now Scrooge looked on more intently than ever, when the master of the house, having his daughter leaning fondly on him, sat down with her and her mother at his own fireside. And when he thought that such another creature, quite as graceful and as full of promise, might have called him father, and bring a springtime in the haggard winter of his life, his sight grew very dim indeed. "Belle," said the husband, turning to his wife with a smile, "I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon." "Who was it?" "Guess." "How can I? Don't I know?" she added in the same breath, laughing as he laughed. "Mr. Scrooge." "Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window, and as it was not shut up, and he had a candle inside, I could scarcely help seeing him. His partner lies upon the point of death, I hear, and there he sat alone, quite alone in the world, I do believe." "Spirit," said Scrooge in a broken voice, "remove me from this place." "I told you these were shadows of the things that have been," said the ghost, "that they are what they are. Do not blame me." "Remove me," Scrooge exclaimed. "I cannot bear it." He turned upon the ghost, and seeing that it looked upon him with a face in which in some strange way there were fragments of all the face it had shown him, wrestled with it. "Leave me! Take me back! Hunt me no longer!" In the struggle, if that can be called a struggle, in which the ghost, with no visible resistance on its own part, was undisturbed by any effort of its adversary, Scrooge observed that its light was burning high and bright, and dimly connecting that with its influence over him, he seized the extinguisher cap and by a sudden action pressed it down upon its head. The spirit dropped beneath it, so that the extinguisher covered its whole form. But though Scrooge pressed it down with all his force, he could not hide the light, which streamed from under it in an unbroken flood upon the ground. He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He gave the cap a parting squeeze, in which his hand relaxed, and had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. right. And that was Stave 2 of A Christmas Carol. A little bit longer than the last one, much more descriptive as well. Um, the interesting thing with Stave 2 and the Ghost of Christmas Past, the Ghost of Christmas Past has to be the one ghost in every adaptation of Christmas Carol that, for the most part, they change. And if you recall the description of the Ghost of Christmas Past, they change it for very obvious reasons, especially in early films. It would be very hard, say, in the 1930s, to do a ghost which is fading in and out and sprouting limbs and losing limbs at a random rate. The usual path they take, which they did in 1938's version of A Christmas Carol, was that they would cast a woman in the role, which, if you think about it, does balance out the male heavy ghost population for the film. They do that a lot on the stage as well. Usually they will cast a woman for the role, though sometimes they do cast a man like it was intended in the book. Um, Sometimes they take very interesting ways of depicting the ghost. 1935's version of A Christmas Carol for film, which I think I had mentioned last week. The ghost is actually not. Well, it is seen and it's not seen. We see the ghost of Christmas Past as merely a glowing outline, which apparently was played by a woman, though though you don't actually see anything other than the shape. 1938, as I mentioned, did a woman. 1951 actually brought a man and depicted it as an old man with long white hair in a tunic, which is, again, close to the book. Not really, though. Um, 1970s Scrooge, the musical version, that one goes a little bit different direction. It depicts the ghost of Christmas Past as a woman, again, but dresses her up in a Victorian winter woman's outfit, and also has her played by an older woman. So it's almost like they took a little bit from the book, but then changed it a little bit more to basically bring in the female angle. Um, Trying to remember all these movies. I've seen a lot of Christmas carols. The 19 the George C. Scott version, 1984, I believe. Oh, I skipped one. The animated version. The animated version in 1971, which I forgot last week. The 1971 version actually is the only time we get a 100% accurate Ghost of Christmas Past. And it's not surprising since it was animated, and the animated version was an attempt to get it closer to how the book depicted it. And you even get the whole very odd fading in and out effect of the ghost. Julian 20, that was a really good one. It is a good one. I highly recommend if you can find that version to watch the short animated version. It actually won an Academy Award, which angered a lot of people because it had been first shown on television, but they had also shown it very, very, very briefly in movie theaters, so it was able to be counted towards the Academy Awards. And when it won the Academy Awards, the a lot of film insiders were so horrified that a work that originally was shown on television won an award that they actually went and made sure to change the rules. The rules haven't changed since then, so that no piece of media that was first shown on television can win an award. FT Waste, let him be mad. I know. I wish they did because it was a marvelous piece of animation. It's beautiful. Um, the 1984 version of A Christmas Carol goes with George C. Scott goes in an interesting direction. They cast Angela, what was her name? Angela Pleasance, Private Maverick in Disney's Mickey's Christmas Carol. Jiminy Cricket was the Ghost Christmas Past. Yes, he was. He did a very good job too. Thank you for reminding me about that one, Private Maverick. I completely forgot. Um, Jiminy Cricket was the Ghost Christmas Past, which was perfect. I mean, he even has a little badge that marks him as the Ghost of Christmas Past. Where was I? Oh yes, George C. Scott. 1984's George C. Scott version. They went in an interesting direction. They cast Angela Pleasance, who is a wonderful actress. She's great. She has a very unearthly way of looking. So in a way, while they did cast a woman in the role, the way they used with makeup and the way they dressed her makes her seem very androgynous, which adds to the very ghostly feel of it. She's also probably one of the darkest, most mean-spirited Ghost of Christmas Pasts that was ever done. That entire movie is very dark and very kind of mean-spirited at its core, but it's very good. It's the closest to being an actual ghost story in nature. It's got the actual tone of a ghost story in it compared to the other ones, which sometimes don't go the full route, or at least get the horror aspect wrong for the period. I'm looking at you, 2019's Christmas Carol. That was a terrible film. Don't watch that one, please. Not even for bile fascination. Avoid the 2019 version of A Christmas Carol. It is terrible. Where was I? Oh yeah, yeah. The 1999 version casts Joel Grey as the Ghost Christmas Past, and that one does try to get again close to the book. It can't quite get there because again it can't do the fading in and out effect like is described in the novel, but they do get it pretty close in terms of a young man looking like an older man, which Joel Grey can do absolutely perfect, absolutely perfect. Oh, I almost forgot. Muppets Christmas Carol does a fantastic Ghost of Christmas Past. It's the puppet they used. This I'll describe it. It's a very small puppet, and what they did is they filmed it in a water tank, and then edited out the water so that you get this very flowing sort of wispy ghost, and it's really a good effect. Wonderful, marvelous, stupendous. And I think that's all the ones I can remember. Oh yeah, the Jim Carrey one. The Jim Carrey one. Um, Jim Carrey plays all the ghosts in that, and they chose an interesting way to go by making the Ghost of Christmas Past literally a humanoid candle. Um, Going the extra mile and logical endpoint of describing it with flame coming out of its forehead and the cap, the iron cap, which is a candle cap. Let's see. Oh yeah, we should talk about the other bits of the Ghost of Christmas Past. The Ghost of Christmas Past segment also they adaptations tend to leave in and out stuff. The one that left out the most was probably 1935's with Seymour Hicks. Excuse me, water. Where they only had one segment from Scrooge's past, and that was the scene of him breaking up with Belle. And for all the real cleverness of that film and some good points in that film, they really dropped the ball in 1935 because they chose to cast Seymour Hicks as young Scrooge. as well as Old Scrooge, and they put a dark hair wig on Seymour Hicks, who at the time was, I think, in his 70s. So he just looks like a really old man with a fake hairpiece. I mean, they did cast an older woman as Belle with him, but it still kind of just doesn't really work at all. Period. 1938's version keeps two scenes from it, which are the scene in the school and the scene in Fezziwigs. And they eliminate all the scenes of Scrooge basically turning into the man he would become, mostly because MGM was not keen to show a lot of depressing dark scenes. Uh, Mostly because it was the Depression, and they wanted something a little bit lighter for their version of Christmas Carol. Um, though they do hint that they were going to show it when Scrooge does turn against the Ghost Christmas Past. They do hint that she was going to show them, but Scrooge turns against her, and that's that. 1951's the Alistair Sims version. That one actually adds the most out of any of the Ghost Christmas Past um, versions, and I really like what they did. They keep in almost everything: the school scene, the Fezziwig scene. Um, they keep in the mother scene. Actually, they do keep in the mother scene in the 1935 Seymour Hicks version. I forgot it's a blink or miss it bit. Um, but they keep it in 1951. I'm trying to think of what else but they add a couple other scenes in it too. They add in a scene showing Scrooge meeting Marley for the first time and essentially meeting a man who basically slowly corrupts him into his way of business thinking. We get to see the beginning of Scrooge and Marley as a business, which is pretty interesting. And we also see Fran's death scene, and that is incredibly powerful. They do a really good job with the movie in that. 1951 does a really great film version of Scrooge. It's another one I kind of recommend. Let's see. What others? 1970s Scrooge mostly keeps everything in it. They do make Belle. They change her to. Oh, they. Wait. No, no. I was gonna say they changed her name, but they really don't. Her name is given as Isabel, which is, you know, Belle, short. Um, I don't actually. Now that I think about it, I think they eliminated the school scene in the 1970 version. I believe. No, they do. They keep it, but it's a very short scene. Um, they make a big scene of Fezziwig. They make Belle, Isabel, Fezziwig's daughter, so it adds much more of that connection, and we get a wonderful, wonderful, marvelous musical number with that version of the musical, by the way. Um, Say happiness is a thing you can do. I'm not gonna sing the entire song, though I do know it by heart. Um, Happiness. It's a beautiful song, and and they did a really interesting thing with this version. Albert Finney, who plays Scrooge in this film, they dressed him. They made him Scrooge, old Scrooge. Took him 3 hours to put on makeup as old Scrooge, but then they take the makeup off as young Scrooge, and they do scenes together with him as old and young, and it's wonderful. It's really really good. I'm just recommending all these Christmas carols. Hard time. Or is there anything I'm forgetting here? Apparently not. Um, the 1984 version, if I'm remembering, again keeps almost everything in there. Um, it does it does move the bell scene, the future Belle scene, to present, actually, of all things. Oh, I forgot. One thing that a bunch of these versions do is in the novel, Fran is younger than Scrooge. We don't actually understand why Scrooge's father didn't really like him, but Fran is younger than Scrooge in many of these versions. But in some of them, they actually switch the ages to making Fran older than Scrooge and making Scrooge the younger one. And they add in a little tidbit of Scrooge's mother having died, giving birth to Scrooge, which adds to why Scrooge's father dislikes him, blaming him for his wife's death. And that adds to the parallel of Scrooge's nephew. Scrooge's nephew also having been the apparent cause of his birth, killing Scrooge's Fran. So you have that parallel. They did that in the 1999 version of Christmas Carol as well. And I can't remember if Muppet Christmas Carol how much they kept in. I don't. I think they kept most everything in it. I know in the version they actually, yeah, the Muppet Christmas Carol actually cut out a song in that one, which was later restored when they rediscovered it. It was cut from the theatrical version and re-restored later on. And I think that's all of them. Muppet Christmas Carol keeps two scenes, which is Fezziwig, a very brief Fezziwig scene, and the breakup with Belle. But yeah, most of the time, Ghost Christmas Past, they take away a lot, they add a lot, and they make little alterations. Yes. So this is a shorter stream tonight because so much reading. Next week, I should mention next week. If everything goes according to plan, Tuesday, more Ace Attorney, and then Thursday, we'll be reading the next segment of A Christmas Carol, which is the longest one in the entire thing, and the one which is basically, I'm not going to say the entire word, but it's a lot of food. So if you're hungry that night, yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. Let's see who we can raid for tonight. Is anyone on right now? I don't know if this. I don't know. Should we raid another reading stream, or should we stick with some gaming? What do you think, my dear scholars? See if there's anyone on who's reading. A reader, okay. Um, hell, let's see. I think Legacy Bookish is reading something. I'm not sure what it is, like a fic. Yeah, I was gonna suggest for Legacy. So let's raid Legacy then. Um, Now then, my dear scholars, I say unto you, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, till we meet each other again at the study. Take care, and I shall see you next time. Till then, farewell and bye bye.